I'm an old man now, older than anyone expected me to be. And there are things I've carried in silence for decades. Things no sailor should speak aloud unless he's ready to feel that same cold air on his neck again. But if I don't tell it now, it goes with me to the grave. And maybe that's worse. We were aboard the San Telmo when it happened. A simple supply run, nothing more. But the sea has a habit of changing plans. A storm hit us without warning. Not a violent one. No. Something stranger. The sky stayed clear while the wind twisted in circles around our sails. The compass spun as if the world beneath us was shifting. By dawn, none of us recognized the water or the horizon. Then it appeared, an island, rising out of calm seas, like it had been waiting under the surface for the right moment. No mark on any chart. No name anyone had heard. Captain Morales thought it was salvation. I remember looking at it and feeling something tighten behind my ribs, like the island had turned to face us. As we drifted closer, faint sounds carried over the water. Slow, rhythmic like distant drums. Then, just as suddenly, silence. A silence so complete it felt deliberate. That was our first warning. Not that any of us understood it at the time. Before we move on, if you're still here with me, make sure you hit that subscribe button. It helps more than you think. And tell me in the comments, where in the world are you watching from? I always like knowing who's out there listening. We were in no state to question miracles, warnings, or anything in between. The San Telmo had been battered for days. Our freshwater barrels were nearly dry. The mast still groaned from the storm's twisting winds. And the men. Well, men lose confidence long before a ship does. Captain Morales held us together by will alone. A tall, steady man who believed every problem had a solution if you stared it down long enough. Navigator Ortega, sharp-eyed and quiet, spent hours checking his instruments, even though none of them made sense anymore. Gunner Reyes kept muttering that the storm had crossed our path into something we shouldn't have seen, which earned him more than one glare from the captain. Surgeon Villalba tended to bruised ribs, split knuckles, and a crew running on fear and salt water. And young Diego. He tried to smile through it all. Only 15, maybe 16. Too young for the things he would later see. When the island showed itself, the captain didn't hesitate. A gift, he said. Water, timber, maybe fruit if we're lucky. His voice carried that confident edge men cling to when they're afraid to admit the truth. But I felt something different. A heaviness in the air. A sense that we weren't approaching land. We were entering something's territory. Something that had been waiting far longer than we'd been sailing. The others saw hope. I saw a warning we were already too close to escape. We approached the island slower than the captain liked. The sea around it felt off. Too still. Too polished, like something beneath it was holding the water in place. And then the ash started falling. Not heavy, not like a fire was burning inland. Just thin specks drifting down from a clear sky. Ortega ran his thumb across the flakes and frowned. Cold, he said. Not from flames. No one had an answer for that. We anchored a short distance from shore and sent a boat to scout the beach. I was one of the men aboard. As soon as my boots hit sand, I felt it. That quiet, that strange weight in the air. But it was Diego who noticed the first sign. Footprints. Not ours. Not human. They were deeper than anything a bare foot could make. But more concerning was the shape. Two-part impressions, as if whatever made them had a split or hinged sole. and the stride length was impossible. Ortega was the tallest among us, and he couldn't match even half the distance between prints. Reyes tried to keep it practical. "Could be an animal," he said, though he didn't sound convinced. We followed the prints a short way until we found bones scattered under a line of palms. Animal bones, at first glance. Until Villalba lifted one and turned it in his hand. "Snapped open," he said. "Clean, taken for marrow." The inside glistened like it had been cracked not long ago. No one spoke after that. The men walked back to the boat faster than before. They forced explanations. Storms, debris, predators, anything to keep their minds steady. But I couldn't shake it. The footprints, the ash, the bones, it all felt wrong. And as we pushed off from the sand, I swear something watched us from the tree line. Not moving, not hiding, just watching. Despite what we'd seen, Captain Morales insisted we make landfall the next morning. Water was running low, and hesitation wasn't something he allowed on his ship. So at first light, we loaded tools, barrels, and weapons, then rowed toward the island again. The closer we came, the more unnatural the silence felt. No birdsong, no insects. Just a windless heat pressing against our skin. The palms moved slightly, yet there was no breeze. Diego kept looking upward as if expecting the sky to explain it. We stepped past the tree line and the temperature changed instantly. Hotter, heavier, like the air had thickened. I could almost feel it on my shoulders, a slow pressure, as if the forest was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. Morales ordered us to spread out and search for fresh water. But before any of us moved far, Diego called out from a cluster of rocks. He held a flat stone in both hands, carved with tight concentric spirals that seemed to twist inward. "Found this just sitting here," he said. Villalba examined it with a careful stare. "Not decoration," he murmured. "Pattern like this usually means ritual. A warning." Ortega shook his head. "No, this marks territory. Someone or something is telling us where not to go." The captain brushed it off. "Stones don't scare me," he said. "Water first, theories later." But none of us missed the way Diego kept glancing into the trees afterward, or how every small sound made the men grip their tools a little tighter. The forest around us didn't feel empty. It felt aware. And as we walked deeper, I had the sense that whatever made those footprints was still nearby, listening, measuring every one of our steps. We hadn't been on the island long when the mood shifted from uneasy to something worse. We were following the footprint trail toward a line of thicker brush when the plants ahead of us began to move. Not shaking, not rustling, but parting, slowly, as if something enormous was sliding through them without effort. Every man froze. The brush opened just enough for light to pass through, and that's when we saw it only a silhouette, nothing more, but enough to cut through whatever confidence we had left. The shape was tall, too tall for any man, and narrow, like its limbs were stretched beyond what bones should allow. The way it shifted its weight seemed wrong, like the body was arranged in a pattern nature didn't design. Ortega whispered, "Do not move," but Reyes had already stepped back, raising his gun. He was shaking, though he'd never admit it. The silhouette cocked its head. The motion was slow, unhurried, almost curious. Reyes panicked and fired. The blast echoed across the trees, scattering birds somewhere far above the canopy. The shape vanished instantly, melting back into the brush as if dragged backward by unseen hands. For a moment, we heard nothing but our own breathing until the forest answered. A low, rumbling growl rolled through the trees. Not from one spot, everywhere at once. It felt like the ground itself was humming. No one spoke. Even Morales looked shaken, though he tried to hide it. He ordered Reyes to stand down and lectured him about wasting powder, about fear spreading faster than sickness, about needing discipline. But the captain's eyes kept drifting to the tree line. He heard the growl. We all did. And none of us believed his calm voice anymore. We returned to the ship before sunset. No one said it out loud, but we moved faster than we ever had. The air on the island felt heavier with every step, like something unseen was walking behind us. The moment our boots hit the deck, some of the tension lifted, but not enough. We anchored farther from shore that night, hoping distance meant safety. For a while, everything stayed quiet. No drums, no movement. Just the gentle rocking of the San Telmo. Then, sometime after midnight, something touched the hull. A soft thump at first, like a hand pressing against wood. Then another. The ship shivered with each contact. Villalba leaned over the side with a lantern, but the light barely reached the water. "Fish," he whispered, though even he knew that was a lie. More touches followed, firmer, sliding along the planks, almost feeling their shape. Then we heard it, breathing, slow, steady, from just above the waterline. Not the quick, sharp breath of a swimmer, something controlled, measured, almost deliberate. Ortega ordered everyone to stay away from the rail, but Reyes stepped forward anyway, gripping his gun. Before he could aim, a line at the bow jerked violently. Another line snapped against the rail, as if something below was testing the knots, pulling at them, learning how they held. "Cut it loose," someone whispered. But the captain raised a hand for silence. A moment later, a pale arm rose above the side of the ship. Not a swimmer's arm. Not any arm I'd seen. Long fingers, too many joints. Bending in a way that made my stomach drop. It searched the air, feeling blindly, scraping against the railing with a dry, dragging sound. Ortega swore it said something. A single word, soft, almost shaped like speech, but twisted. Impossible. The arm slipped back into the dark. None of us slept after that. We stood watch until dawn, lanterns lit, weapons ready, waiting for another touch on the hull or a whisper from the water. The sun finally rose, but it didn't bring comfort. It just showed us the island again, still, silent and watching. And for the first time, every man aboard wished we had never seen it at all. Morning didn't erase the night's fear, but Captain Morales insisted we go back ashore. He said we needed answers, water, wood, anything that justified staying. Not a single man agreed, but no one argued either. Sometimes fear makes you obey faster than loyalty. We walked inland again, following the same path, though every sound from the brush made us turn our heads. The forest didn't feel empty anymore. It felt alert, like it had taken interest in us. About half an hour in, we stepped into a clearing none of us had noticed before. The first thing I saw was the ground covered in bones arranged in spirals, neat and deliberate. Each piece placed as if part of a pattern only its maker understood. Larger bones at the edges, smaller ones tightening toward the center. Then the skulls, stacked upside down in small towers, one balanced on another. Their hollow eye sockets pointed downward, as if meant to watch the ground instead of the sky, and stretched between two leaning trees, like some grotesque banner, was skin. Human? Animal? I couldn't tell. It was scraped thin, stitched together with fibers, dried like parchment. The lava stepped closer, his jaw tight. He didn't touch it, but he leaned in just enough to study the edges. Bite marks, he said quietly. Rows of fine teeth. Needled, not human, not any animal I've studied. He held up a bone and traced the tiny punctures. Something gnawed this clean. Reyes muttered a prayer under his breath. Even Morales didn't speak. Then the drums started. Not loud, not fast. Slow, deep, rhythmic. As though struck far away, behind layers of forest, but still powerful enough to thud in our chests. One beat, then another deliberate, spaced apart like footsteps. The clearing seemed to tighten around us. The bones, the skulls, the stretched skin, they no longer felt like remains. They felt like messages. The Laba whispered, "This isn't a hunting ground." Ortega finished the thought for him. "It's a ritual site." And suddenly the silence of the island made sense. Everything here was watching, waiting, choosing its moment. We backed away from the clearing, slowly, carefully, as if sudden movement might trigger something we couldn't outrun. Morales tried to keep us moving in formation, but even he was glancing into the trees more often than he was giving orders. The drums kept going steady, patient. We were almost to the edge of the clearing when the brush to our right shifted, not violently, just enough to show something passing through. The same slow parting we had seen before, but this time it didn't stop. A shape emerged from between the trees, stepping or sliding into the open light, and for the first time, we saw it clearly. Its body was long and pale, almost colorless, like something that had grown in darkness its entire life. The limbs were thin and jointed backwards, bending in ways that made my stomach flip. Every movement was smooth, too smooth, like it wasn't using muscles at all, just gliding forward with an ease that didn't belong on land. Its eyes caught the sunlight, not like an animal's, more like stone reflective, cold, almost polished. They didn't blink. Then it opened its mouth. The teeth, God help us, the teeth weren't in rows like ours. They formed rings, concentric circles of tiny, sharp points leading inward into darkness. And when it breathed out, it made a small clicking noise that felt like it was trying to shape a word. "What?" The sound broke halfway, distorted, wrong. But it was close enough to mimic us that every man stepped back. It took another smooth step forward, and then 3 more appeared behind it. They moved silently, all pale, all long-limbed, all with those same reflective eyes. One tilted its head as if studying our stances, measuring them, comparing them to something it already knew. Morales raised his hand to keep us steady, but even he couldn't mask the tremor in his voice. "Hold your ground," he said. But the creatures didn't look interested in a fight. They looked curious, almost intelligent, mimicking our spacing, mirroring our retreat. As if this meeting was something they had rehearsed long before we ever set foot on their island. And in that moment, I realized we were not discovering them. They had been waiting for us. The creatures didn't rush us, and that somehow made it worse. They moved in a slow, deliberate pattern, spreading out, tightening the space around us, guiding us. Not attacking, no. Hurting, like we were animals being pushed away from something deeper in the island, something they refused to let us see. Morales ordered us to fall back, but the moment we turned, the creature shifted behind us, directing our path with small, precise movements. Every time we tried to veer left or right, one of them glided into our way, silent as smoke. They wanted us gone, but not dead. Not yet. Diego stumbled while looking over his shoulder. Before anyone could reach him, one of the pale figures darted forward. Its movement was a blur too fast, too fluid. It wrapped its backward jointed arm around him and pulled him off the path. Diego screamed. It wasn't the scream of a wounded man or a frightened boy. It was a sudden, sharp sound, and then nothing. Cut off, like the air around him swallowed the rest. Reyes broke formation and fired without thinking. The ball struck one of the creatures in the shoulder. For the first time, we heard pain from them. It shrieked. The sound tore through the trees, a piercing cry that made my vision shake. My legs nearly buckled. Ortega dropped to one knee, clutching his ears. Even Morales staggered, gripping his sword as if it were the only thing keeping him upright. The other creatures reacted instantly. Their heads snapped toward the wounded one, their reflective eyes flashing in the dim light. They didn't attack us after that, but their herding shifted. More forceful, sharper. They drove us faster, pushing us downhill through a tangle of roots and low branches. Every few seconds, the wounded creature let out a shorter, broken cry. The others answered with clicks, coordinating, communicating. We didn't understand the pattern, but we understood the message. We weren't welcome here, and Diego was gone. Not injured, not held, gone. In the chaos, a low, narrow opening appeared between two rocks. Morales shouted for us to keep moving, but something pulled me toward the darkness inside, an instinct. A need to hide before the creatures closed in completely. I grabbed Ortega and Villalba and dragged them with me. The forest behind us echoed with another shriek. We ran into the darkness of the cave without looking back. The world changed the moment we stepped inside. The air cooled instantly, as if the cave had been sealed from the island's heat for centuries. We pressed against the stone walls, breathing hard, listening for signs that the creatures had followed. Nothing, just faint clicks in the distance. Then silence. When our eyes adjusted, the cave's interior came into view. The walls were covered in handprints, hundreds, some small, some large, and some long-fingered and stretched in ways no human could make. They overlapped in layers, old and new, as if generations had marked their place here. Ortega whispered, "People have been hiding in this cave for a long time." Villalba corrected him softly, "Not just people." We moved deeper until the passage widened into a chamber. That's where we found the mural. It stretched across the wall, crude but clear. It showed creatures shaped like the ones chasing us, standing on a shoreline. Opposite them were ships, old ships. Not Spanish, not Portuguese, something older. The mural showed those ships breaking on reefs, men dragged ashore, bodies carried toward the trees. Then another layer of drawings. Ships turning away, leaving offerings on the beach, escaping. Finally, in the most recent part of the mural, there were carvings, actual carvings, scratched into the stone with iron or steel. I stepped closer and felt my stomach twist. Spanish. Very old Spanish. 3 words. "We do not stay." The letters were uneven, carved by a desperate hand. Villalba ran his fingertips across them. "Others were here," he said, "long before us." We stared at the warning until the reality sank in. This island wasn't uncharted. It wasn't forgotten. It was avoided by everyone who understood what lived here. We stayed in that cave longer than we should have, each of us listening for footsteps, clicks, or any sign that the creatures had followed. But the forest outside stayed eerily quiet. No drums, no shrieks, no breathing. Just a stillness that felt worse than any noise. When we finally stepped back out into the daylight, we found Captain Morales standing with Reyes and two others at the edge of the clearing. His face was set in that hard, determined look he used when the ship was in trouble. He didn't ask where we had been. He didn't comment on our missing men or the scratches on our clothes. He simply said, "We're going back for Diego." Ortega shook his head instantly. "Captain, he's gone. You know that." "No," Morales said. "He's a boy. We don't abandon our own." I knew the captain meant it. Morales had always believed leadership meant returning for everyone, no matter what. But this wasn't a storm or a battle. This was something older, deeper, something that had its own rules. "We can't go inland again," I told him. "It's not about Diego anymore. This island has boundaries. And we crossed them." Reyes stepped forward, gripping his gun with white knuckles. His voice cracked. He screamed. He was alive. That scream, Ortega said quietly, wasn't a call for help. It was an ending. Morales refused to hear it. He turned toward the forest, ready to force his way back in. That's when they appeared. One by one, stepping from behind trees, sliding from between bushes, rising from the tall grass. The pale creatures formed a wide circle around us, not lunging, not attacking, simply blocking every path except the one leading back toward the beach. Reyes raised his gun, but I grabbed the barrel and pushed it down. "No," I whispered. "Listen." The creatures stood still. Their reflective eyes watched every twitch of our muscles. Their limbs shifted subtly, not in aggression, but in repetition, forming a pattern, a boundary, one they expected us to understand. "They're not hunting us," I said, finally understanding. "They're driving us out." Villalba's voice trembled. "Then why take Diego?" I swallowed. "Because he ran inland. He stepped deeper than any of us. That's what they protect." A creature tilted its head, almost agreeing. "They only kill what tries to take from the island," I continued. "They warned us, the footprints, the bones, the spirals. This isn't random. This is territory." Morales refused to accept it. He pushed past me, moving toward the gap between two creatures. They didn't stop him. They simply watched. "They're letting him choose," Ortega said. "But he won't come back." I called after the captain once, just once. He didn't turn. He disappeared into the trees, the forest swallowing him without a sound. Then, a single shriek rang out across the island. Not as long as Diego's, not as sharp, but final. The creatures turned their heads toward the beach. The meaning was clear. Leave. So we did. Ortega, Villalba, Reyes, and I ran through the path the creatures opened for us. Not chased. Not touched. Simply guided back to shore like unwanted guests overstaying their welcome. When we shoved the boat into the water, the creatures stood at the tree line, motionless, watching. Not triumphant, not angry. Just ensuring we understood the choice they had offered. I rowed until my arms burned, until the island blurred behind mist, until the only sound left was my own breath and the creak of wood. Behind us, the captain's scream still echoed in my mind. Once we passed the reef, the sea changed. The rocking eased. The waves softened. And for the first time since we'd spotted the island, the water felt normal again. almost calm enough to lie about what had happened. The drums, those deep rumbling beats, stopped completely. Not faded, not faint. Stopped, as if someone had snuffed out the sound with a single breath. We hauled ourselves aboard the San Telmo, exhausted, shaken, half mad from fear and loss. Reyes collapsed against the mast. Villalba stared at his hands like he expected them to still be trembling. Ortega kept scanning the tree line, even though we were already drifting away. I couldn't help looking back. There, standing alone on the beach, was one creature, motionless, tall, pale, reflective eyes trained on our ship, but not threatening, just observing, making sure we left. For a moment, it tilted its head the same way the first one had when studying us. Then, without haste, it stepped backward into the forest and vanished from sight. We didn't speak until the island was a fading silhouette. Reyes broke first. "We have to report this," he whispered. "The Crown needs to know." "Know what?" Villalba said. "That we found a place no map dare show? That creature's older than our religion, live in its shadows. They'll call us mad. They'll call us liars," Ortega added. "But we did report it once we reached Havana weeks later. We told the officials everything. The footprints, the drums, the creatures, the screams. They documented our story politely, nodded in the right places, and sent us on our way with instructions not to drink so much rum before giving testimony again. Still, the story spread. Sailors talk. Cartographers listen to sailors more than nobles do. And soon an unmarked patch of ocean on several new maps carried 3 small words in faded ink. Here be ghosts, not creatures. Not guardians, ghosts. A safer explanation for men who never stepped foot there. Years passed. Other ships vanished near that same stretch of sea. Some returned with terrified crews. Others never returned at all. Yet the Crown never sent an expedition. No one wanted to claim the island. No one wanted the glory that came with stepping onto a shore that swallowed men whole. Now, after a lifetime of trying to forget it, I understand something much clearer than I did then. The island is not the danger. The danger is the hunger beneath those trees. The ancient patience. The silent way the forest listens for new footsteps. And the knowledge that one day, someone else will answer that listening.